Well, Sir Keir Starmer has shared his support for Ukraine's President Zelensky, calling him a democratically elected leader, adding it's perfectly reasonable for him during this time of war to suspend elections.
Well, it marks a stark contrast from President Trump, who branded Volodymyr Zelensky a dictator after the Ukrainian president accused him of living in a Russian-made disinformation space.
Donald Trump also had this to say overnight at an investment forum in Miami.
President Zelensky talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go into a war that basically couldn't be won. Europe has failed to bring peace, and Zelensky probably wants to keep the gravy train going. I don't know what's the problem, but he hasn't been able. He's very upset. He's been working for 3 years. There's never been even meetings or phone calls to stop this war. It's a horrible thing. He refuses to have elections, is low in the real Ukrainian polls. I mean, how can you be high with every city is being demolished? It's hard to be high. Somebody said, oh, no, his polls are good. Give me a break.
Well, meanwhile, European military chiefs are considering a reassurance force for Kyiv, which could include 30,000 British and European troops positioned away from the front line in the east of Ukraine.
Well, let's talk to the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Dame Priti Patel, who's in Westminster. Pretty lovely to see you this morning. Can I ask, what do you make of what President Trump's been saying?
Well, look, I think first of all, just on his comments around President Zelensky, clearly they're not right, and you won't be surprised to hear me saying that because I was in government at the time when Russia invaded illegally Ukraine, and everyone knows Britain's commitment, the commitments of successive Conservative governments as well, and now this country and our government, the current government, when it comes to supporting Ukraine. What I don't think we should be surprised about, though, are President Trump's overall remarks about the rest of Europe, including NATO allies, when it comes to defence and security. This is a really important and pivotal time for Ukraine, but also for Europe. This war and conflict is the most brutal conflict on our continent since the Second World War. And that's why it's vital, it's urgent and it's essential that Britain leads the way, it steps up on defence spending, and at the same time it does what we did throughout the Ukraine conflict. We persuade our European allies and also our NATO allies to raise the bar when it comes to defence, security and military support.
Would you support then a reassurance force, as it's being described by European military chiefs, that 30,000 troops, some British, some European, to be in the east of Ukraine, boots on the ground?
So I think, first of all, Ellie, we're just reading about this in the papers, and I've read this morning too. We don't know the details, and also it is premature because General Kellogg, who is the US Special Envoy to Ukraine, is in Ukraine today, and he will be effectively, hopefully going to the front line, but meeting President Zelensky and others to get a better understanding as to what's needed. I actually think Britain's leadership role should be, number one, increasing our defence spending, and my party put forward a plan in the run-up to the last general election to increase military spending to 2.5% of GDP. It's a costed plan, and we would work with the government to deliver that. I think when it comes to speculation about troops and things of that nature, first and foremost, as His Majesty's opposition, we'd need to scrutinise the government and ask many more questions about the details of this. What I don't think is acceptable is that we see briefings in newspapers just speculating about this. We need to have proper substance, proper details, and quite frankly, we need to be part of those discussions and conversations. But I think it's far too early. Our focus should be on security and defence spending increases, and we'd work with the government to ensure that we could actually get to the sustainable levels and look at how we can increase our industrial base, our military capacity, look at new technology when it comes to defence and security. And I want to see this government stepping up in that area.
And a lot of people would support you in that. I mean, there is a feeling that we really need to boost our armed forces, boost spending, but at a time when we seem to be so strapped for cash that the Chancellor's even considering reducing ISA limits from 20,000 to 4,000, and pensioners' winter fuel payments are being cut and all the rest of it. Just, do we have the money? I mean, is it remotely feasible for the government at the moment, do we think?
So, Steve, I think you know what I'm going to say on this. This is all about the choices our national leaders in this government choose to make. I disagree completely with everything that Rachel Reeves has done to our economy. We've got a shrinking economy, inflation is growing, and people are losing their jobs and livelihoods, and that applies to people in my own constituency. These are the political choices that this government has made. On defence spending, my party had a fully costed plan and proposal in the run-up to the last general election, and there are ways in which we can increase our defence budgets and spending. And I would argue more than ever, as my party did in the run-up to the general election and last year, and as we have done in government throughout the Ukraine crisis and conflict too, that we must continue to invest. Look at what Britain has done in our support for Ukraine. This is a war on our continent. This is Putin's illegal invasion, the most brutal and barbaric war on our continent since the Second World War. The Ukrainians are standing up for freedom, sovereignty, the rule of law, the same freedoms that our veterans, Steve, fought for in the Second World War. You mentioned a veterans charity earlier on. It's a significant period in our history. The geopolitics around this are very difficult, but when it comes to public finances, this government are making the wrong choices. They're hurting the most vulnerable, our pensioners. They're hurting working people. That is wrong. And we had a fully costed plan to support defence spending, and I'd urge this government to take that plan up and work with us on this.
Can I ask you about something totally different? Can I ask you about the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds? He's the second cabinet minister accused of embellishing his CV, talking about himself being a solicitor in the House of Commons, also on his website as well, referencing his work as a solicitor. It turns out he was just a trainee solicitor. He never actually qualified. Should lying on your CV be a sacking offence?
I think it should, to be quite frank, and obviously there are clear codes in the legal profession about claiming to be a solicitor, which he clearly is not. Personally, I think he should be out on the airways explaining why he felt he should be doing that. It's totally unacceptable. And I think this smacks of the complete weakness that we see from Keir Starmer, the failures of his government. We've seen this with Rachel Reeves. I think Jonathan Reynolds actually needs to account for himself. And one of my colleagues, in fact, the Business Secretary himself, has written to Sir Laurie Magnus, the standards, the investigator, to effectively scrutinise Jonathan Reynolds about this. This is simply unacceptable. It is not professional. And I think actually it does a lot of damage to politicians who believe in public service, if I may say so, and people that want to serve their country in an honest way and in a transparent and accountable way and stand up for our country. And at a time like this in particular, when this government is weak, it's failing, it's not standing up for Britain in the world, or when it comes to our own domestic economy and doing much more in the way in which it should be, I think there are very serious and significant questions that Reynolds needs to be answering, and also Keir Starmer needs to be addressing.
Dame Priti, good to see you. Thanks very much indeed.